Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractor connection with Dr. Stu Bittman. Stu, can you get us just started by introducing yourself and maybe reflecting back to what inspired you to become a chiropractor?
Well, it was a long time ago, but let's see if I can muster that up. Let's see. It was not all that exciting a story. I was working in a casino up here in Lake Tahoe. This was like 1979, ancient history, and hurt myself on the job and started to see a chiropractor on a workman's comp case. And he happened to be a poker player that I met through my wife, who was dealing poker at the time in Harris, Tahoe. Anyway, I was very impressed with what he was doing, and one day he just kind of out of the blue said, "What do you plan on doing with your life?" And I said, "I don't plan on being a slot floor supervisor my entire life. I have this background in biology and actually physiology and neurophysiology." So he said, "Why don't you go to chiropractic school and come work with me?" And that was kind of a novel idea, but within a few months, I was in school in Toronto, and well, anyway, that was my start in it. I didn't really discover what I consider to be what chiropractic really is until 3 or 4 years after I'd graduated from chiropractic school, and that was more of an inspirational thing, and that's what I chose to run with, the philosophy, the principles of chiropractic, and yeah, that was how it started, though. So I'm always
Mhm.
grateful for this guy, even though it did not work out practicing
Mhm.
with him.
Even though that took 4 years after school to find chiropractic, um, that was still 40 years ago or 30 years ago. Can you reflect on the life you've led since you discovered chiropractic and how it's really
Hmm.
shaped your worldview or just shaped your path?
Well, it's was how I pretty much discovered my, I hope it's okay to say, spirituality, my sort of holistic view on things. My my wife has always leaned that way. I was Joe Science. I was the valedictorian at LACC, as it was called then. It's the Southern California something or other now. They took chiropractic out of the name, I noticed, which I thought was pretty honest. Um, anyway, from the moment I heard it, it filled this like incredible hole in my chest that I was only vaguely aware of, uh, and destroyed my foundation as far as a belief system in science, because I realized that wasn't really a reliable thing to kind of base a foundation on, because science to me became just an attempt to explain what already is, and will always be lagging behind the truth of what is. And we discover a little piece, like Isaac Newton discovered what he called like a grain of sand on the beach, while this whole ocean lies undiscovered in front of me. So I felt like I got a glimpse of that ocean. So I just honored that, and started to go and see every speaker that talked about chiropractic philosophy, and started to attend these personal development workshops that Jim Sisyphus, who became my main mentor in chiropractic, was putting on. So I just started working on myself a lot and filling myself up with the philosophy. And then about 5 years into that, I started going on these mission trips. First 4 times that chiropractors went to Panama. And I could talk about those for an hour, Ben, but the third time we went, just really briefly, we adjusted like 385,000 people. It was 140 something chiropractors, and I adjusted like 2,000 people in one day on one of these trips, and that I'm not throwing that out as anything other than the amazing miracle it was, because we couldn't. I didn't speak any Spanish. People would line up. People would show up hours before we were supposed to get there. People would carry people there. People would, God forbid you missed one of their kids. All of a sudden, somebody would be tugging at the back of your shirt. It was a dream. It was a dream come true, and to just touch people and adjust people in a matter of seconds without any idea of what their problems were, or what, or worrying about following up, or worrying about whether they liked us or whether they were going to pay us. We knew they weren't going to pay us, so that took care of that question. Um, I never got so much out of an experience before that, or actually since then. But I decided to change me, because I realized that really what the main thing that was different there was me, was us, was how we approached it. We approached it without attachment to things that I believe don't really matter. All those things I mentioned, like whether the person likes me or pays me or heals up in front of me, because that's not our job. That's not our responsibility. That's something that's between them and their innate intelligence. If hopefully folks know what that is, that inborn amazing wisdom within all of us, that the purpose of chiropractic is just to free up, just to remove interference from, and allow what's already been beautifully, magnificently designed to express itself. And I saw the power of that. I witnessed, I mean, not only individual people like getting up out of wheelchairs and reporting to us that the kids were no longer deaf, which happened on the first day we were there in Panama, the first time, which is very interesting, because apparently that's how chiropractic started. And none of us, what was interesting was there was only one chiropractor of the 18 of us who were there on that first mission that had ever seen that before in his practice, and that was Jim Sisyphus. So it became clear to me that the problem, if there was one in my practice, was, my vision was small, my attachments were large, my attachments were very sticky. I was still trying to convince people and sell people, and at that point in my career, I wasn't even sure what I was selling them or convincing them of. So it changed everything for me. It gave me a purpose. I started adjusting a lot of kids. It ultimately led to me doing the box on the wall thing, which literally means people would come in and get adjusted, and there was a box there on the back of the front desk that we encouraged people to put the most they could in for that service. And I did that for the last 12 years of my practice. And look, I own a nice shirt or two,
Mm-hmm.
it's it was changed everything when I discovered the principle and ran with it, and decided to change myself so I could be more of a vehicle for that principle, rather than to try to change the principle to suit me. That was the big shift for me.
Mm-hmm. Can you mention some of the limitations in consciousness, or deconstruct some of our cultural hypnosis or conditioning that needs to be undone, or needs to be at least looked at within ourselves, or that you looked at within yourself, because you said that it shattered your foundation that you were standing on, when you were challenged by some of the premises that are at the core of chiropractic.
Yeah, I mean, probably the main one was that I had the arrogance, I see now, to think that I knew better than the wisdom within that person's body, and that I knew what was normal for that person, or what was supposed to be normal, and that I had the right, or the ability, or the knowledge, or any of those things to dictate to that person's being what it was supposed to be. And that became really clear to me. But when I got out of school, that's what I thought it was about. I thought because I went to school a few more years than that person, then I knew, what was, again, what was normal or what was abnormal, and what to do about it if it was abnormal, and all this stuff. And we already have a profession in the world that pretty much handles that. And hey, I just had a hip replacement, so I'm not saying it's valueless. There, first aid, trauma, stuff like that. Therapies are very wonderful to have. Right now, I'm going to the physical terrorist, as Reggie Gold used to call him. But I actually like it, and I actually love her, and I know that it's helping me, because, but none of that stuff to me is chiropractic. Chiropractic is, again, the simplest thing. It's the honoring of that wisdom, which, again, if we looked at the world, especially these past 2 years, I think we still have some major deconstructing to do, because here we are, believing, and I have nothing against science, but unfortunately science is kind of handled by scientists, And it's some scientists that I have trouble trusting, and especially basing my life and death choices on, when,
Mhm.
I happen to know there's, anyway, we don't want to get into that, but
Well, how,
obviously,
just while you mention the word scientist, can we reframe scientist within the context of chiropractic and becoming a chiropractor? How would you say a chiropractor is becoming a scientist in a new, fresh way, maybe?
well, first of all, I believe chiropractic is very scientific, but it's not Newtonian science. It's not outdated science. It's based on, what I guess is still called a new science, even though it's been around for 100 years. More quantum theory, more that science, I believe, confirms everything that we've hold true in chiropractic. So I think, first of all, we have to come into the 21st century here and let go of some of these things that apparently some other branches of healthcare are holding on to for dear life. Uh, but a vitalistic science, a science that, and so science becomes relevant to us when we can replicate, when we can, someday my hope is that somebody goes into a chiropractor anywhere in the world, and they don't necessarily receive the same kind of adjustment, because we're all artists, and it's cool that we have our unique way of bringing out that expression of innate, but at least that would be the intention, and that would be something, again, that we could reproduce, or at least show, as is being shown now, because the research in chiropractic is slowly changing from trying to do the impossible, which is create double-blind studies, blah, 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 blah. Whereas, we're showing that chiropractic adjustments have an effect on the brain, have global effects. This is the kind of research that to me is very exciting. And that's where, to me, the science comes in. Not relying on science to tell us like what, where, and when, but why, like, and how, to some extent, but not basing, again, how we approach somebody on the basis of the science of their physiology and thinking that we can change it, even though we can, but knowing how we can change it, or how we should change it, or what it should be changed to. Because, again, as Reggie Gold used to very simply say, do we know how much vitamin C somebody needs? Does everybody on the planet need the same amount of vitamin C? And does everybody on the planet, one person on the planet, need the same amount of vitamin C today as they did yesterday? So for us to tell them, no, you need like this many milligrams, is a lie to some degree, because really the only thing that knows, not only how much vitamin C somebody needs, but where their bones in their spine are supposed to be, and everything in between, is the wisdom within that person who, that designed it to begin with and maintains it in some incredible level of ease and balance, long before we came around.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and I used to tell people, according to Deepak Chopra, every cell in your body can do 6 trillion things, and every second you have about 70 trillion cells. That's a big number. That's like 420 with 24 zeros things that apparently your body is capable of doing in 1 second. So, for me to stand there and say, okay, I went to school for 4 or 6 years longer than you did, again, and I can dictate to an intelligence that can do that. I mean, I could barely write down that number. I was impressed in school that I could memorize the Krebs cycle, but it didn't really occur to me that every single mitochondrion in that person's body was doing the Krebs cycle. And I'm like, okay, I take a humble back seat to that wisdom. I don't know if that was still related to your question, but I get going.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it. Do you have any suggestions for how a student embark on this path to become a chiropractor, and spending time in nature, different observations that they can really extract meaning from, that will help prime them for when they go into chiropractic school, or that
I,
will.
if certainly, if what I have been talking about resonates as a possibility in chiropractic, because I realize a lot of people get into chiropractic these days. I mean, a lot of people get into chiropractic these days without ever having seen a chiropractor. So it's a bit of a challenge. In the old days, excuse me the expression, we had a lot of third, fourth, fifth generation chiropractors getting into chiropractor, or at least somebody who had had some successful experience seeing a chiropractor. But now, since we've been on the Forbes lists and all that kind of stuff, we're attracting sort of a different thing. But if what I call the true ideas of chiropractic, and I only call them true because they're kind of the original ideas, and I also feel they're based on truths that are universal in the world. Then yeah, I think it's cool you mentioned spending time out in nature, because that's exactly one of the things I'd recommend, because out in nature you get to see the truth of everything that's chiropractic. It's somehow all that's going on. And Sisyphus used to have us just sit in one spot and observe for hours at a time, just as a way to tune into the amazing miracle and the tiny parameters that life kind of holds for things that can flourish, and how adaptable everything is, and how cyclical and how beautiful it all is. And just to realize that all of that, whether you're sitting at a waterfall or you're looking at the stars, that's that same wisdom, that same incredible power is in not only us, but in everybody we'll ever touch in our life. So yeah, to become humble to what is, and then obviously spend some time with a chiropractor, or observing a chiropractor who believes that way, and see what's possible, and see how fun it is, and see how freeing it is, and how, because again, it's such a beautiful, simple thing to know that the greatest doctor in the universe just walked inside the person that you get to work on. It's it's a big advantage. And that all I have to do is really be skilled at finding where the interference is, and skilled at correcting the interference or minimizing the interference, and skilled at communicating this idea, and that's about it. You do learn a lot of other stuff in school, which can be very supportive, and I'm not saying is wrong or excessive. It seemed that way to me, especially when I got the big idea, as we say in chiropractic. But it's cool. It's cool to know all that stuff. It's cool. It's certainly cool to recognize what you can't handle, which is, in my opinion, very little. But let's see. We cover that. Other things, yeah, and again, there's you've probably already read. If you've ever read Deepak Chopra, or if you read Wayne Dyer, or if you've read, I'm not sure who's big these days, but any of the self-help stuff, any of the nonfiction, 5 of the 10 books on the nonfiction list probably still, to me, are talking about chiropractic philosophy. But none of these things offer a tool, offer a bridge, offer a physical expression, or a way to bring that idea to life. Whereas that's what we have in our hands and in our heart. So yeah, if you're thinking of getting involved in chiropractic, I applaud you, because it's still, to me, the most beautiful, powerful, amazing thing out there. So
Can you maybe just speak from experience and reflect on some of the distractions? Right now, today, there's so much noise that is making it difficult for people to listen. And just how you developed your ability to listen to others, to listen to yourself, to follow your own inner compass. How does one really start to play with that in their own life?
well, let's see. And that's been my path for 35 years. So I don't want to make it sound simple or quick, but again, like you're saying, it has to start somewhere. First of all, it requires some setting aside of time to even get quiet enough to hear and to listen. Turning off the phone, turning off the internet. Not forever, folks. Don't freak out, but gosh, a half hour a day to start, or something, whether it's in nature or not, to hear, as Sisyphus used to call this, the wee small voice, and then once you start listening, to start acting on that voice, to start trusting in that voice more. Because I could tell you there were years where I heard it, but I would talk myself out of it. I mean, even going to my first Sisyphus gathering, I got in a vision, in this guided meditation that I would spend a weekend in the desert with Sisyphus, and then like the next day I see this flyer for this workshop in Sedona, Arizona, which I happen to know is in the desert, and I'm like, no, that's not enough of a sign for me, right? It's how do I afford that? I can't do that. I can't take time off. I can't. What would my mother think? So it's having the, and I don't like the word discipline, so I prefer blisscipline. Having the blisscipline to work through some of those other voices, to start paying more attention to the ones that I feel are more heartful or more coming from truer places in me than from fear places, or but meditation and gratitude work and forgiveness work. And I don't want to make it sound daunting either, but I mean, these are the things that I recommend to all my coaching clients, and I tell them all, none of them are horrible. None of them are painful. None of them are torturous. All of these things bear fruit all along the way. So it's not like you have to wait 35 years to get somewhere. It's moving in that direction to me always. It's about expanding our vision of ourselves and about what we do. And so starting on that path, and then circumstances will come and opportunities will come, like Panama or some equivalent for you. But you have to open the space for that, and you have to shut off. You have to come apart from the world now and then, and certainly the world of media and all of that, because it's not even a distraction. I wouldn't even call it a distraction anymore. It's more like just constant noise. It's more like our attention is there all the time.
Mm-hmm. If we're centering our voice on the pre-Chiro student that knows that there's something to this that is calling them, and their family and their friends don't get it. The other people in their life had a picture or a vision of them going a different direction, maybe. Is there a way that you maybe suggest they go about developing a, shall I say, presentation of why they're choosing this path, and maybe not engaging with these people in their life that matter to them so much? Or maybe, I'm just curious what you feel about that dynamic, or what you think about that dynamic.
Well, I'm just trying to think back on my life, and I don't feel I ever had to explain it to anybody. I mean, if I did, because I practiced for 24 years, and I had about 8 people on my last day that were with me on my first day. And I think it would have been a lot more, but I happen to live in South Lake Tahoe, where 42% of the population leaves every year or something. It's a pretty transient place. So I think some of those people moved away before they stopped coming in. But anyway, and that's significant to me, that I still had people with me from the first day, because the first day they were getting half-hour treatments, as I call them, with multiple therapies and stuff. And on my last day, they were getting a minute and a half adjustment, upper cervical essentially only. And you would think that I had to do a lot of convincing of people along the way, but I never see. The main factor for me was, if I felt it was right, if I had certainty around it, then nobody ever questioned me about it. In fact, they would say, "Oh God, I'm so happy I'm getting out of here a lot faster than I used to." Or right. But there were a few people who said, "Well, where is that ultrasound machine? I really like that." And so, I took the Sisyphus approach. I would offer it to them. He said, like, "Here, take it home, and try it for a few weeks and see if you still think that was what was doing it," kind of thing. And I actually did that with somebody once, and they brought it back within like 3 weeks.
Can you talk about the upper cervical region, and why you came to value it so highly, and prioritize it over everything else, or just center your focus on it?
Yeah, I mean, it always made sense to me, principle-wise. It made sense to me that just on a neurological level, every nerve fiber running from the brain to every single cell in the body is present here, right, in the upper cervical region and in the brain stem. So it made sense to me, but I think, again, what brought it to life was Panama. And after the first trip, we decided we didn't have the time to lay people down on tables. So there were thousands of people waiting, and we didn't really have time to adjust full spine. So what can we do to benefit the maximum number of people here? And that choice was rather obvious. We could do seated upper cervical, and everybody was told that if they got the hit or the feeling or the impression that something else was needed, that was fine. But that's what we were going to do. And again, to adjust an upper cervical and see a 12-year-old get up out of a wheelchair for the first time in her life, or all the other amazing things we saw. And it wasn't even what we saw, Ben. It was like what we felt, the entire energy of the country changed. I mean, 385,000 people in a country of 2.5 million people is a pretty good chunk. and wherever we would go in Panama, people would, we were white, so that probably helped. Everybody knew, oh, you guys must be the chiropractors. You guys or must be the guys who are making everybody in Panama smile. That's what it became, and that's what we heard from the director of this school for challenged kids. It's thousands of kids in the school, blind kids, deaf kids, cerebral palsy, vaccine damaged kids. It seemed obvious to us. In fact, it was at that school that one of the deaf kids got their hearing restored after her first adjustment. And after a week of working there, and have the director say, we saw this and we saw this, and this is amazing. And the kids have been getting every conceivable kind of care for the 27 years that I've been here, and we've never seen anything impact kids like this. But the most amazing thing, the thing that everybody's talking about, the thing is that these kids are smiling. So we heard this thing about smiling over and over, and I think that's really significant because for one thing, you're not in chiropractic yet, folks, but they don't teach you an adjustment for smiling. There is no smile adjustment. There is no get up out of a wheelchair and walk adjustment. There is no particular bone that you plug into to have somebody's hearing restored. If you happen to hit the right note, if you happen to get where the interference is, which is really what our training is about, then who knows what could happen. And so that's where the upper cervical thing became real to me. And I realized that sometimes we do too much by trying to adjust 206 bones on every visit. By the way, that's how many you have in your body, including the ones in your ears. We may think, well, we won't miss the interference if we adjust every bone in the body, but I think we're giving that system a little too much to handle. Whereas if we could really hone in on where the interference most likely is, which, according to BJ Palmer, our developer, would be the upper cervical area. And again, that's it's a different joint up there. You guys will learn it's a lot more subject to traumas and stress, especially at birth. So for a lot of reasons, the upper cervical area. And again, I didn't isolate myself to it, but I made sure that was clear. And sometimes for the first few weeks of somebody's care, I would only do that because I wanted to make sure that the main power switch was on before we started playing with the circuit breakers, so to speak.
Just to share a little bit about my awareness that you became extremely involved, maybe even a leader of a spiritual community in your town. And you just mentioned that you have clients that you help facilitate coaching for. Can you talk about what the inspiration behind those two directions was, why you moved in that path?
I've been heading in a spiritual direction, what I consider a spiritual direction, not necessarily a religious direction, but and when I say spiritual, again, honoring some level of wholeness or intelligence beyond what I know and beyond what I can see. That's kind of a simple definition of my belief. So I started to attend what's called a Unity Center here in town, because that's where all the spiritual people went, and I actually guest spoke there many times over the years, because my message was right up their alley and their message was right up their alley. And then over the years, I became a little more involved in the community. I found a community of people who actually didn't need convincing. It was like preaching to the choir. So in a lot of ways, it was an attractive thing, and I really kind of fell in love with the community. So around the time my hip became an issue as far as adjusting, A lot of people that I was still adjusting, a lot of people, and then again, our minister left, and blah blah blah. And I got this calling that was a total surprise to me. I was actually at the going away party for the former minister when I got this message, like, you do this, and I'm like, what? Is there somebody else up there, or wherever that message was coming from? But at that point in my life, I knew that was real, and that that it was a valid thing to run with. So yeah, we did that for 12 years, and after doing both, still I was running a practice and a church. We didn't necessarily call it a church, but that's the closest one word for it. And my hip was still barking and barking even more. So I decided, again, surprisingly to me, because I thought I'd be one of those guys who keeled over and died at 95 adjusting somebody. I chose to leave active practice and go into ministry, and did that for 12 years. But Ben, I'm glad you asked that. So before I go to the other aspect, which I already forgot, I will say that from the first month, my wife and I noticed a difference. Even though we thought we were going to be addressing the cause of interference a lot more by dealing directly with consciousness, people were not making the kind of changes we saw in our chiropractic practice. People were, liking it and coming for the camaraderie and for the inspiration, but they weren't necessarily there to make changes in their life, and they weren't receiving what I was to discover was a big piece of all that, which is the chiropractic adjustment, and it made a big difference. So I became more passionate about chiropractic actually by leaving chiropractic than by staying. So what was the other one you asked me about besides
Just the
ministry?
role you've played in other chiropractors' lives and helping facilitate their journey, but also with the insights you've gained from working with other chiropractors and them becoming vulnerable in conversations with you and sharing their struggles, what you've identified to be some of the more common challenges that chiropractors face in their path.
Okay, well, I think the main one is that our actions tend to lag behind our vision, or our highest vision. We go to seminars, or we hear something like this, and we get super excited and we say yes, and that's how I want to be. And yet, you go into your office, and it's the same people, and it's the same posters on the wall, and it's the same staff, and it's the same maybe expectations we think people have, the same convincing we still think we need to do, the same, like, meet them where they're at and teach them something new, which I know is conventional practice management philosophy, but it's not my philosophy. I discovered that people are ready. People have been way ahead of us on this in chiropractic for a long time. We're the ones who are afraid. So that's another factor. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid of being looked at as crazy. We're afraid of success. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of a lot of things. And it's, again, how could we not be with all the distractions that we've been exposed to, and all the warning things we've been given and stuff. So, I don't know how many times I heard in my life, don't fly too high, it's a long fall, blah, blah, blah. Stay small, stay quiet, stay under the radar. So, here we are in this profession that's not exactly status quo. So that's one of the biggest challenges is fear. And BJ Palmer said, you can't be a chiropractor till you've overcome your fears. And you can go to school and get a license, but you can't be a chiropractor until you're bold and enough and have enough, as Jimmy Parker used to say, faith, confidence, and belief in your product, services, and ideas, and especially yourself. So it takes a little work. It takes a little work to overcome that. And it takes a little work to overcome the idea that we do have to sell or convince anything, or that everybody's belief system is wrong, and the only way we can help people is by making sure they know they're wrong and teaching them this new. No, man, over the years of sharing the kind of message that I'm sharing here, it was like, duh. It was like, this is what I've always believed. This is, I'm so happy to have found somebody who could explain it that way, because I couldn't have explained it to somebody. But yeah, this is, sure, I get it. So did I answer your question? It's
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest one. But to go back to the first thing I said, we have to be also a little bold, and sometimes, like, I started saying things to people before I was 1,000% convinced they were even true.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I realized what I had been telling them was not even remotely true. So it became a little easier to tell them something else. But that takes a little bit of stretching, and it takes a little bit of, I don't want to use the word in religious context or have anybody even go there in their mind, but faith. It takes a little bit of faith in oneself and in the principle and in the fact that people are not as entrenched or indoctrinated in their stuff as we might think. It's just their veneer, just like ours. We all got raised in this, by the time you and I were 10, we already saw some, I don't know, the statistic, it was nauseating how many commercials we'd seen, health related commercials telling us that we can't be healthy. We can't have social contact without Prozac, and we can't, so we all grow up thinking we're weak or deficient or lacking in some way. So, but I think in our hearts, we all know that's not true. So, yeah. So to figure out what your why is, your biggest why, your biggest vision, and to be working every day towards actually communicating that way and living that way and embracing that, and not just holding it as some dream for the future, but be moving toward it, again, in our hearts and our minds and our communication every single day, and we'll catch up, or we'll get closer, and then our vision will expand, and we'll have more work to do. But it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Keeps us busy for a lifetime.
I'm curious what you think about the role that education, chiropractic education, has on the educated mind, thinking that you need to go and get a job as an associate, whereas potentially, if you're listening more to the innate mind, it's guiding you to follow your own path and chart your own course. And if you have a suggestion or a recommendation on how a student break down maybe that limiting belief that they're gonna go and become a employee when they get out of school, or that they want to go to chiropractic school because they want to get a job one day doing that
Right.
work.
Well, there's nothing wrong with having a job, but I hear what you're asking. To go in, if you're not in school, you have to go in with the idea that, because chiropractic education is fear inducing, is, in that, again, we get bombarded with so much mechanistic medical ideas, and again, they have value in the world, but for us, I think they create even more interference to what we were just talking about, to our ability to live innately, to live from our heart, because we again, our heads are just overloaded, and we're only, just like all through our education, even from kindergarten, we're judged on the basis of what our heads can spout back. So it's just really a continuation of all that, but even more so because it relates to what we're going to be doing. And in my school in particular, I mean, there is some variation probably among the schools in this aspect, but in mine, it was like, don't do this, don't handle this, refer this out. It was more about what you couldn't do than what you could do. And of course, that's not filling you with a lot of confidence, and not helping to overcome your fear. So going in, if you could go in knowing that's what's going to happen, and stay connected to people who know otherwise. I mean, Sisyphus's daughter went to Life University, which is considered one of the better, more vitalistic, more chiropractic, from a historical standpoint, schools. And she came back halfway through the program and said to her dad, "Dad, you're going to have to teach me chiropractic all over again." So it's a challenge. But again, if that's the deal, then you can put it in perspective, and you can know that they're there to teach you what the government and what the political boards have said is necessary for us to have a license. That's pretty much what it's about. And learn what you can, because it's fun to learn, and
Mhm.
file it away, because again, it'll always be there to back you up. And I enjoyed, in the back of my mind, like, people would come in, and even though we would, we didn't talk about their symptoms that much, they would tell me about stuff that was going on, and I would, my diagnosis, which I wouldn't even share with them, would be right 99% of the time. Right, even though they've been going to doctors for years trying to figure it out. For some reason, I felt like I could have been a better medical doctor than the medical doctors, but I just kept that in the back of my mind. So whatever you want to do with that information, it can be supportive and can be helpful, but to know that that's not really the core of it, and that if you can stay connected to the core of it through chiropractors, or through groups that you can have in school or through clubs, keep the principle of the thing, keep the why as front and center in your awareness as possible, because they're going to try shoving it further back in your awareness. And to some degree, in order to pass the exams and stuff, you do have to give it a lot of focus and attention. So that's what I would suggest. But I would also say that, whatever your path is, so I went through all that, and I had to unlearn a lot, but I think that was a huge part of my path. So, what if you can hold a vision, which I didn't have until later, um, you'll get there. Even if it seems like you've taken detours, sometimes those detours are a big part of the path. People ask me, like, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something, 35 years ago, that you didn't know. My usual answer to that is I wouldn't have listened. So why do I bother? I'm not going to bother trying to even think of something that I could have said, because I would have laughed at it, or I would have said, whatever, that doesn't apply to me. Hopefully there are people who are not as far gone as I was,
Mhm.
and can, take some of this and steer themselves in a direction that feels more congruent and heartful
Mhm.
for them. But, whatever you go through is probably what you need to go through, is what I would say.
Mhm. I think
Um,
there's so much truth in what you said right there, as I probably wouldn't have listened, and I think that a very small percentage of people, maybe early in their professional pathway, are curious enough. Maybe they have curiosity, but they're not curious enough. And I'm curious. I've always been curious. That's how I found chiropractic, or and this is actually my segue. A lot of people say chiropractic finds you. That you don't find chiropractic. That people that become chiropractors became chiropractors because it was their calling, or that chiropractic found them. And this project to me is an experiment of what is possible, or the potential that we might not have ever thought of, by asking a new question, which is, well, what if we find chiropractors? What if we find people who are perfectly positioned to find purpose in being a chiropractor,
hmm,
and bring that awareness to them earlier in their pathway, and then give them opportunities or a platform, or show examples of other young in their stage. I mean, I know that there's people in their 50s in chiropractic school, but people that just decided they wanted to become a chiropractor, or just discovered chiropractic, and now they're on your high school campus, or they're in your middle school, or they're in your college campus, and like, we're all just exploring together, sharing experiences together that have never really been shared at this stage of the life
hmm,
cycle, really thinking through what's the life cycle to become a chiropractor. And that's another differentiator. You could become a doctor of chiropractic and get your license to be a chiropractor, but to be an actual chiropractor is actually has a different meaning, and it's
hmm.
not really differentiated clearly enough, right? A lot of the
Right.
inspiration behind this project is because I only met you because I studied alongside the student in the classroom next to me at Western States in Portland. Um, she had already gone to school in Brazil one time, and she was going through school a second time, and it was mainly because her family was local, And I had chosen that location because I loved the nature of Portland, and it just felt great when I went and visited there. And I would go to these weekend, seminars and get exposure to the philosophy of chiropractic as a first quarter student, and then go back to school and say, oh my gosh, this is not congruent. I need to transfer. So I transferred,
Hmm.
and then I get exposure to people like yourself and many other people who are really just pouring into the students and filling the students up with so much that allows students to overcome fears, whatever those limitations are. And I ask myself, why are there no chiropractors up at that school really offering these
Hmm.
same seminars? And then I hear about the politics of how those schools have purposefully kept these chiropractors away from their students.
Hmm.
And now we have the internet that connects everybody. You can't
Can't hide
protect
it.
your students.
Right. And I don't know why you'd want to protect the students from information that, because to me, it's one of the beautiful things about chiropractic is the latitude that we have to express ourselves in it. Again, I would love if our intention was all the same. Um, but to expose students to possibilities, again, I'm not sure what we feel we need to protect them from. So that's a good point, Ben. One of the things I would advise, no matter what stage you're at, is to stay open and to be willing to explore, and to not get too locked in right away, whether it's the technique or the vision. There's very few chiropractors I know who have been at it for any length of time who do the same exact technique that they were doing when they were in school. It's going to evolve as you evolve. So, and that's our art form. So, and we have managed to make technique one of the many things that we have decided to use to divide ourselves and to hate each other and stuff like that. That's, that's another story, but it doesn't have to be that way, especially if we're the ones who propagate that. And I think that, again, that comes from, oh, this is the only way because I went to this dynamic speaker and they told me it was the only way, or whatever. However we arrive at this rigidity of thinking, whereas the whole idea of chiropractic is dynamic. There needs to be room at the top. We don't know everything. We'll never know everything. Whatever we know, there's always going to be more, and the more we know, it's always going to seem like the more we don't know. And I love that. That's what makes it exciting to wake up in the morning and see what's possible. So don't buy into that. Don't get too locked in. It's that's one of the biggest problems I think we have as a profession. We isolate, we judge each other. It's like, some speaker said a long time ago, when chiropractors are in trouble, we tend to circle the wagons and shoot in. It's a weird thing, and I don't know if it comes from 120 something years of feeling subjugated or feeling whatever we've been feeling, but uh, obviously it may be a wiser approach to that would have been to stay together. So I think your experiment is beautiful, and I think it would help in this regard. I think it would really help if students came in with, again, with some semblance of a unifying idea of what it's about and what we're doing. And sure, we're unique, and we're going to have different ways of bringing that to life, and that's great. And that's beautiful. But
I mean, you touched earlier in this conversation on birth trauma, and the parallel I draw to how are we bringing incoming chiropractic students into this world of chiropractic? Is that a subluxation that our schools only require admissions requirements? That's all that the schools require right now. There's admissions requirements, and is it a subluxation that the schools are the only ones that are really doing the outreach to attract the students in? And they have quotas they have to meet. They have overhead. They have
right.
staff. They have so many other agendas that interfere with centering the student in their mind and caring enough for that student to be successful. There's been plenty of published papers on how you graduate with 50 students in your chiropractic graduating class, and in 5 years only 5 of you are left, or 10 of you are left, and chiropractors eat their young. All these things have been perpetuated decade after decade, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
we need to start asking new questions, which is
We
like,
do.
how do we stop playing defense and play more offense? You know,
Hmm.
stop how do we stop placing all of these defensive, like, we need to keep drugs out of chiropractic, we need to
Hmm.
um, prevent schools from closing, to like, how do we represent chiropractic better to the public? How do we create a positioning of the profession in the eyes of the general public in the schools? You know, I
Hmm.
just had a baby about a year and a half ago, and when we go to the library, there's about 50 books on dentists and doctors for little 1 to 2 year olds. There's not a single one for chiropractors.
Hmm.
And that book could be created by a chiropractic student in probably, or a chiropractic student club in probably like one semester. And what if we had multiple schools creating these little baby books about chiropractors? I'm just saying, there's like so many gaps in our understanding of what it is going to take to reach, the public
I
with who we are. And we're doing it individually, but like you said, it's very fragmented.
and
But
it's
it all comes from right in this center here, and it's all going out, which is beautiful. But
comes
it
from
needs
the
to come back.
vast. It says vast right there over your heart, right?
Yeah, vast, macro,
Yes.
micro, vast.
And
Yep.
I have like a tree of life. Yes. Okay. So
Sweet.
yeah, I mean that's beautiful, and I honor you for your project because yes, there's a project in Wisconsin right now where they're adjusting kids in the schools, in the public schools. That was something I thought was impossible, but it's happening and it's growing. But you're right, it's always been a pocket here, a chiropractor here, an individual here, and if we could start from more of what you're talking about. Um, God, there are kids' books in chiropractic that have been around forever too. So Sisyphus sold a book 30 years ago called Billy the Life Cell. I could still remember every word of the thing. And it belongs right next to those books. It was beautifully illustrated and stuff. But I think, again, it's that second-class citizen thing that the schools seem to propagate. It's like, we're not going to get funding from the medics, so we have to play this game, blah blah blah, and yeah, it is a subluxation. It's a huge subluxation in the profession. So starting with the youth has always been what I thought was a wise idea, and again, starting with the youth, not so much like it's in the top 15 professions as far as income, but what it is and what it stands for, and because maybe especially after these 2 years, I think there's going to be a huge uh, hunger for a way to stay safe in this world, for a way to feel safe in this world, for a way to embrace something other than media and science and the fear. Um,
And
and
can
we have always been in a beautiful position to be the standard bearers for that. But we're either jumping on the medical train as it's going off the cliff, or we're hiding, or well, I'm just going to do my thing in my office. And of course that's fine, you do help a lot of people. And yet I'm excited about your vision, because it's a piece of the vision I've had for a long time. I just, maybe we needed the internet, maybe we need, so here it is. The foundation has been laid. So good job, my man. Good.
I mean, just to be clear, I think it's about asking questions that aim to really address that subluxation, right? I posted something recently where PreMed hashtag, hashtags on the internet allow you to connect to information and create information networks. Hashtag PreMed student, 950,000, 1.2 million posts that have been created in the name of being a pre-med student and giving you YouTube channels and Instagram channels in the day in the life of a medical student.
Mm.
Pre-Chiro has about 150 hashtag posts. There's like nothing
Mm-hmm.
at all present when you search, how do I become a chiro? It brings you to the Association of Chiropractic Colleges, and it just shows the entrance requirements. And it basically just lists the
Mm.
schools. So yeah, anyway, I hear you. It's
We still have work to do. It's good, but yeah,
it's
that's
a lot of work to do. Yeah.
well, but it's exciting. It's more exciting, because part of me is picturing, what was his name? Sisyphus, the Greek guy who must have done something really bad, and he was doomed to eternity of rolling the big boulder up the hill only to have it roll back down. So on some levels, it feels that way to me, because after talking and hearing about these kind of things for decades, but things have changed and things are changing. And again, media is in place to allow this. So you're right. Starts with the questions we ask. Like not how do we survive. I think that's the main question that's we've asked as a profession since 1895. And again, there were reasons for that, especially at first.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some of the paths we took and the choices we made in the name of survival were necessary to survive. But at this point, hopefully we're past that, right? And just as a person, when they get out of survival mode, tends to make different, better, higher choices for themselves. And it's more about growth and thriving, and about how to how to expand that vision in the world rather than how to survive. It's a whole different, right away, that's a whole different energy, a whole different question.
With the
So
environmental crisis, climate crisis, I think a lot of the questions are around like how do we survive, and chiropractic being natural, sustainable, requiring no energy outputs as far as carbon goes. Um, it's in alignment and resonating with an entire generation of young people who recognize that the clock is ticking. You know.
absolutely, absolutely. And thank you. I hadn't even realized that, but that's very true. I mean, I've always thought that our principle was the answer to all the problems we have as a species and on the planet. And yes, the time is right, because there are very few people who would argue that we have unlimited time as far as resources and the planet goes. So yeah, and also again, what I said is we could be the standard bearers for a life based on that, based on what already is and what already has been magnificently designed. And so we don't have to continue to interfere with the planet, and we don't have to continue to pollute the planet and therefore people's bodies, and we don't have to continue to do invasive, aggressive things so again, and we don't have to buy into all the status quo and all the stuff we hear and all the media, because we're free thinkers, and we know that a lot of that is financially motivated or politically motivated, and it has nothing to do with reality or with truth. So a lot of people know that, and they certainly knew that 2.5 years ago, but they were scared right back into it. And I'm not judging that. But it's because maybe if we had done a better job 125 years ago, we wouldn't have fallen for that as a species so much. So I see a very big picture for what you are doing and the vision you're holding. And because I've always felt we had the answer in our heart and in our principle and in our hands. So it's an exciting time. It's a beautifully exciting time. But you're right. We can't just go about it the same way. We can't go about it, lurking in the dark and hoping that, one person at a time is kind of going to do it. We need to keep working one person at a time. But as these other avenues have opened up, it's time. It's our time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just a closing question. If this is more of like project development, shall we say, is visuals, obviously. Well, I'm just curious if we have 30 seconds to capture somebody's attention on a commercial that's broadcast in classrooms in high schools where there's chiropractors giving talks, or um, posted on certain websites where we get Ohio State, any undergraduate institution, to have a representation within their guidance counseling department of chiropractic. Um, how can we? I mean, we could watch this interview back and tease apart 100 different messages that could be utilized to really attract people for the right congruent reasons to this path. But I'm just working on storyboarding commercials because I think that I haven't seen any quality commercials put together. I'm just
Hmm.
curious what your thoughts are on that, because this is just like implementation of a strategic plan to actually accomplish some of these goals of raising awareness, presence, um, to these populations of students that are really looking for purpose and are looking for a path that helps them align themselves with the world around them and be an instrument for change.
So would you like me to create a commercial?
Yeah,
Oh, you mean right now?
yeah.
Well, I probably would give them like first 30 seconds of the health talk that I used to give. It's like that you and a dead body have a lot in common. That structurally, chemically, physically, you have all the parts, you have all the chemicals, it's all there. And yet, if you boil it down, again, alive or dead, you'd get $3.50 worth of chemicals. Why is it that when you're alive, that $3.50 worth of chemicals can do 420 with 24 zeros things in any second, and when you're dead, you don't do nearly that many? Well, something like that. Just that you eat Twinkies and that becomes part of your eyeball and your spleen, and again, it's more than 30 seconds, but I would home in on that. And again, did you ever think about the fact that, like Reggie Gold used to say, while you're listening to this commercial, if you realize you're late for the bus, and all of a sudden your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your muscles get, the blood gets shunted to your muscles. It's like, did you have to think about any of that stuff? So playing on the fact that it's already been amazingly designed, and that here's a profession that can actually help people enjoy more of that, experience more of that, get back to more of that wholeness that is their birthright, that you actually can do something to help them move back in that direction of wholeness. I don't know, to me that was more than 30 seconds, but it's a very powerful message. And then, of course, with more information available, we can back a lot of that up. Anyway, that's probably the approach I would take, but I'm sort of a simple guy. So
I appreciate you so much for taking the time and
my
really just
pleasure, my friend.
opening up people's minds to the journey. So, yeah.
Well, you too. Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. Let me know how I can help.